All right, so this is the 8th grade grammar lesson. We're going to be talking about recognizing complex sentences. So remember yesterday we talked about simple and compound sentences, that simple sentences, if you go back to, it was on page 239, a simple sentence contains one independent clause and no dependent or subordinate clauses. A compound sentence contains two or more independent clauses, but no dependent clauses. So today we're going to talk about sentences that do contain one or more dependent clauses. A complex sentence contains one independent clause and one or more dependent subordinate clauses. And look at the example they give you on page 242. The students who are painting the scenery should bring a change of clothes with them. Actually, you know what might make this a little bit easier? Let's see if I can do this. Students who are painting the scenery see if I can make that bigger. Okay. Now, what's really helpful to do is just to figure out the different parts of the sentence, right? So, what is the subject of this sentence? The students, right? So, here's the definite article. It's the students. Which students are they? The students who are painting the scenery, right? Oops. Right? The students who are painting the scenery should bring a change of clothes with them, right? So in the example, right, what we have is one independent clause and one dependent clauses, right? So one independent clause and one dependent clause are in this sentence, right? This one might be a little bit more difficult to see because you have a pronoun there, but essentially, the dependent clause, if I were to say the students, let's look at this. If I were to say the students should bring a change of clothes with them, Does that stand alone? Yes, it does. What about the students who are painting the scenery? Right? Who are painting the scenery does not stand alone. Right? The students who are painting the scenery. Okay, the students who are painting the scenery what? Right? It doesn't stand alone in a sentence. Right? So that's a dependent clause. It's dependent on the rest of the sentence. Okay. The next example, if you are wise, you will listen to the counsel of others who are older and wiser than you are. Right? There are 3 dependent clauses in this one, right? And 1 independent clause. So if I were to say, you will listen to the counsel of others, I can say, you will listen to the counsel of others. That's not dependent on the rest of the sentence, right? If I said, if you are wise, if you're wise, what? Right? That's dependent on the rest of the sentence. How about who are older and wiser? Right? That's not an independent, it's not a complete thought, right? How about then you are? These are not complete thoughts. They're dependent on the rest of the sentence. You can't have these parts of the sentence stand alone. You will listen to the counsel of others is a complete thought, right? You could stand that alone in a sentence. It would be perfectly fine. I'm not saying it would get across the same point, but it's definitely a complete sentence. In some complex sentences containing a noun clause, the independent clause is not obvious because the noun clause is part of the independent clause. No one doubted that Rob had spent many hours practicing. That Rob had spent many hours practicing is the dependent clause functioning as the direct object. No one doubted is the independent clause. No one doubted. You can just write that. I mean, that's a complete sentence. But if I were to say that Rob had spent many hours practicing, nobody would have any idea what you're talking about. So you can hear these things if you just go through them and spend enough time reading these. You can hear what part of the sentence is the independent clause. And remember what a clause is. What is a clause? A clause contains a subject and a verb, right? No one doubted that Rob had spent many hours practicing. No one doubted is a clause. No one, and then the verb doubted, but that's standalone. The other part, that Rob had spent many hours practicing, is not, right? Dependent clauses always have introductory words, sometimes understood, that join them to an independent clause. So sometimes understood means that they're not actually stated, but you know that there's an unstated word there essentially. Let's look at the exercise on page 242, number 1. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. Okay. Underline all verbs twice. Underline all subjects once. Put brackets around each dependent clause, right? So the subject here is help, my help, cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. Which is going to be a pronoun. subject of the second part of the clause here, right? Cometh is a verb. Made is a verb, right? So these are two clauses. They contain subjects and verbs. Right? The question is, does this stand alone? Which made heaven and earth? If I just said, hey, which made heaven and earth? You would look at me funny. If I said, my help cometh from the Lord. So this is your dependent clause. This is your independent. If you can't say it as a standalone sentence, it doesn't qualify as an independent clause. If the group of words you're looking at doesn't have a subject and a verb, it's a phrase rather than a clause. Let's look at number 5. Righteousness keepeth him that is upright in the way. Righteousness keepeth him that is upright in the way. Right? So if you're what is the subject of this sentence? Righteousness. And then there's your verb, keepeth. Him is, right? I'm sorry. I got that wrong. Should be, it's keepeth him. And the other subject is that is. That is obviously a pronoun. So righteousness keepeth him that is upright in the way. Right? So my dependent clause is going to be that is upright. Right? That is upright. It's dependent on the rest of the sentence. If I said righteousness keepeth him, that can stand alone. Right? Righteousness keepeth him. But that is upright. The subject and the verb is there. It's a clause, but it doesn't stand alone. It's dependent. Okay. Hopefully you understand that. Right? If you have a sentence, a clause is a group of words that now the reason that this is, let me explain something. The reason that this is separated is because that is upright. These words serve a function in the sentence, right? They are separate from in the way. This is actually serving to modify that is upright. That is upright in the way, right? So this part is the clause that we're looking at. That is upright. And it is definitely dependent on the rest of the sentence. All right. So I hope all that makes sense. Let's look at one more. This is the day which the Lord hath made. Okay. So in this particular sentence, this is a pronoun. It is a subject, the subject of the sentence. This is the verb. This is the day which the Lord hath made. Lord hath made. Right? So this is the verb, hath made. The Lord is the subject. Lord hath made. Right? Now, question here is, which is the independent clause? And which is the dependent clause? Right? This is the day. Can stand on its own. This is the day. Which the Lord hath made has a subject and a verb. It is a clause. And it cannot stand alone. If I were to just say, which the Lord hath made, what did he make? What do you mean? Which the Lord hath made what? But if I said, this is the day, okay, I may not know what you're talking about, but it's a standalone sentence. All right, so what I want you guys to do is finish out the exercise on 242 at the bottom there. And I want you to do exercise C on page 240. .242, the exercise that we were going over, we went through a couple of them, and 240 exercise C. That's your grammar lesson for today.